I started off in design, a Dublin-based company, Irish company. We were one of the leading players in video projection, VideoPro, all those years ago. Learned a lot there, worked with some brilliant engineers, and went from there to Moog in Cork, again, working in design. We had some very early career highlights coming out of that. We developed a product for a key customer in Germany. This is in 1985, started in May 85 there. 8 months later we demonstrated what we developed, and its success was such that 2 weeks later, against all competition in Moog Europe, so Moog Germany, Moog Controls in the UK, Moog in France as well, and ourselves, the four of us were vying for who's going to become the European Design Centre. We did the demo and it surpassed all expectations. We were even a bit shocked ourselves.
Nice. What was your role then?
I was 24.
And what position did you have?
I was a project manager, design engineer, yeah. We developed a 7 kilowatt electric motor that could go from 0 to almost 2000 RPM in 0.4 of a second. It's very much the technology that's now been used 40 years later in electric vehicles. So Tesla did not invent the technology. But yeah, I mean, 2 years later, 2 weeks after the demo, Moog in Ireland, in Cork, was designated European Design Centre. And there's been an average of at least 100 people working there for the last 40 years. So it's been that was a really major highlight, I think, early on. I worked in a company called Mac in Limerick for 7 years. They were a design consultancy, and that was pretty interesting. We developed with a company called Trintech, a Dublin-based company, the first chip and pin system globally. And I remember at one stage there was two brothers. One of them was for a period of time the wealthiest guy in Ireland in tech. So you don't see that happening too much anymore. But it showed to me very clearly that Ireland was well capable of producing some serious technology, some serious companies as well. We did work for GPA, which was amazing. They were buying 3,000, about 300 memory boards for their computers, and they worked out that this will tell you how smart the guys in GPA. So just two of the guys who were in that at the time. Michael O'Leary was one, Dennis O'Brien was another, and obviously Tony Ryan himself. But they approached us. They said, "We think we're paying too much for these memory boards." And we said, "Yeah, industry standard boards would be a fraction of that price." And within 2 weeks, they said, "Can you guys redesign a board that they sit on so we can use industry standard memory?" And we did, and 14 weeks later, they were delivered. So instead of costing 750 grand, they paid more or less exactly half that, 375. And I remember kind of going, these guys are seriously sharp. So yeah, that was an interesting experience. We developed a lot of really good products during that period. One of them was the company Superrule as well. They'd be global leaders in measuring things like cable height for utilities. It was an ultrasonic beam that was so narrow that it could actually get a reflection off an electric cable at several hundred meters above the ground. It was just a phenomenal exposure to technology. Did a lot of work for the companies like Wyatt, Apple, Pfizer's, multiple big players, but also entrepreneurs just walking in with an idea. After Mac, I moved to a company in Cork called CorkOpt, and we were commercialising technology out of what was then the LMRC and is now Tyndall. We were doing photo detector components, and I kind of brought in people who had worked in the electronics industry. So we added, signal processing, we added optics, we added mechanics, so optomechanics, and went from a component company to a systems company very quickly. Liam Kelly was actually a professor who had founded the company. I came in to run the company, and we grew from, I suppose, a one-man band to a company with 11 or 12 people at the time, and we got a subsidiary of Mercedes as a customer. We had John Bean. We had a number of patents as well. We developed sensing for, if seat belts, in the event of a crash, detecting a person and, knowing which seat belts to tighten, etc. The modern wheel balancing equipment uses a laser. We developed all that. It's all back in the 90s. The next big thing, I suppose, in the electronics industry for me was kind of roll on to 2010. I did work in distribution for most of the noughties with Future Electronics. It's involved in a couple of things, and it suited me for family reasons to do that. But 2010, I brought a company, iWatt, into Europe, and their first customer, believe it or not, was actually the Apple, the iPod. They had developed this really novel technology for being able to convert AC to DC without using an optocoupler as feedback. I won't go through the gory details, but nobody believed they could do it. And everybody was saying, well, Fairchild or National, they should be able to do it. How come you guys can do it? And along came Steve Jobs and wanted a power supply to be literally the size of your finger. Just to, if you cut it in half there, the only company in the world that could do it was iWatt. So that happened in 2007, and that kind of got the company up and running. I then joined them between 2010 2011. I worked with them on a consultancy basis for a period. But from Greenfield, I got IKEA and Osram, Philips, Collingwood as customers. In fact, Osram had gone from, when we closed the deal with them in 2013, I was told, you guys are number 58. I said, what does that mean? He said, well, we've just reduced our supplier base from 250 strategic suppliers to 57. You're the first increase in the last 2 years. So that was nice. And IKEA kind of copied them. And then all of IKEA suppliers did whatever IKEA did. So we had programs running in China. One particular program, a company called Lee Darson, they're doing 3 million chips a month on a single program for IKEA. So we became global number one in about 2 quarters. Wow. In dimmable LED lighting chips. It was just awesome. So, I mean, what was nice about that project as well was that we were the first company to solve the problem of LED lights on conventional dimmers. I don't know if you remember, 13, 14 years ago, LED lights, if you put them on a dimmer, they'd often flash. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have forgotten that. But we solved it with a bill of materials and a chip that was meeting a certain price point that it needed to be at. And if you think about going from the old GU10s and MR16s, which were 50 watts down to 5 watts, every bulb that goes to LEDs is 45 watts saved per hour. Yeah. I measured the impact once, and it would be the equivalent of at least one small power station when you look at it globally. At least. In fact, it would be more like multiple. So that was a great time. We were acquired by Dialog Semi, and Dialog Semi had Bluetooth technology, and that's how I got introduced to Bluetooth. That was my first time in the Bluetooth world. So we were acquired by Dialog Semi in 2013, mainly for for 2 reasons. We had technology that they didn't have, but we also had 2 very interesting customer bases that they didn't have. One was AC to DC, so phone charger technology. We're the number one company in that, a Finnish company called Salcom, did about 20% of the global market. And the other section then was lighting. We had Osram, IKEA, Philips and companies like that. And Dialog had Apple for the power management, and a few other companies are, as customers, but their customer base would have been very concentrated. So they saw us as an opportunity to spread their customer base. We've grown from 8 million per quarter to 22 million per quarter in 7 quarters, which is pretty aggressive. That's from around late 2011 to second quarter 2013. So Dialog was a funny company. It was very political, and I enjoyed the technology. I enjoyed my colleagues, and I ended up getting involved in a lighting startup, and had first-hand experience in the UK. I was in the UK at the time. Had first-hand experience of just how brutally difficult it is to raise finance anywhere in Europe for a startup. Personally put in 6 figures. Everybody I met, including all the finance people, it was a really beautiful LED-based light bulb that would last a lifetime. We had invented ways of kind of cooling the LEDs so that they would run at only about 20 degrees C above ambient. Yeah. And the lifetime of an LED is almost entirely dependent on the junction temperature and how long it's at that junction temperature. They just degrade over time. The cooler you can keep that junction, the longer your lifetime is. So I don't think I met any single person. Well, I did meet one, I'll tell you about him now in a minute, but I met almost nobody who didn't want to buy our light bulbs. And I said, well, why don't you invest? And they said, well, you'll be copied by the Chinese. I said, we won't. It's not as easy as it looks. But I did have one guy who said he liked changing light bulbs because it made him feel like a man. I said, yeah, good on you, buddy.
I was going to say a product that doesn't need a replacing needs to be pitched at a high price, though, as well.
Well, exactly. And, I said that as well to lots of people. I said, look, who's going to believe it that a Chinese company is going to build a product that's going to last, 70 years? Because with a 100,000 hour lifetime, a light bulb is used for about 1,400 hours per year on average. That's 70 years. That's a lifetime. So, our whole pitch was really clear. People got it straight away. But anybody who got serious, they just said, you're just going to be copied. Yeah. I said, it's not as easy as it looks.
Consider it defensible.
Yeah, since then I patented another aspect of it, multifunction LED light bulb, which I still have a patent for. Anyway, in April 2018, I joined Imagination Technologies. In March 2019, I had another guy ended up taking over that business unit, and we were given 18 months to get it turned around, which basically meant by the end of 2020. I ended up, for personal reasons, the other guy left. His dad wasn't particularly well, and he went back to the US. So I ended up taking over a group of about 120 people in September 2019. And long story short, we changed how we address the market. We moved from being we do Wi-Fi IP to we do a very, very specific version of Wi-Fi, and this is all we're interested in. We're not going after the Qualcomms of the market. They do stuff we can't do, and we're also not going to compete with some of the stuff that functions as Wi-Fi a lot of the time, but not all of the time. That was selling in China. I said we're in a middle market. We were doing this thing called Mac and Phi. We were doing Wi-Fi 5. We said, look, let's just scrap that program, move straight to Wi-Fi 6, and shift our process node as well from 14 nanometer to 22 nanometer, because that's where it needed to be at the time. And that got a lot of the market that we were targeting interested.
Okay.
We ended up getting a number of companies very interested in what we're doing, and in, I suppose, mid Q2 2020, I was running the business unit. I had responsibility to the business unit, but I also was on the executive management team, so I had responsibility to the company. And I couldn't see how we could be more than slightly profitable with all the winds blowing on our back. And one of the two companies that we got very interested was Nordic Semi. And on November 28, 2020, we sold the business to Nordic Semi, the connectivity business, primarily for Wi-Fi technology. So we sold the Wi-Fi intellectual property, we sold the team, and as part of the deal, a lot of the guys who are working in Bluetooth as well went to Nordic Semi. But the Bluetooth IP remained with Imagination. Now, one of the sweet things about November is that we also did a very significant licensing deal with a key customer. It's probably confidential who it was, so I won't say, but it was worth almost the same value as the sale of the business unit to Nordic Semi. It was like close to 2x for the business unit.
That was a good day or a good month.
It was a good month, yeah, it really was. So during, I knew a lot of people in the industry, and in late 2020, early 21, I was approached to set up a Bluetooth low energy business unit to design team really to develop Bluetooth low energy for a company based in China called Senscom, and they had developed Wi-Fi 6 IP. At the time, they were close to getting certified for Wi-Fi 6, so the WFA Wi-Fi Alliance. And they didn't want to be in a position where they'd be forced to pay, what could be exorbitant licensing fees, and they wanted to develop it in-house. Now, they already had some IP in-house, they had technology in-house that had been kind of licensed in, and a lot of work had been done on that. So between 2021 and early 2025, the company did Wi-Fi plus Bluetooth technology. We licensed the BLE IP that had been in Imagination. I hired a number of people who'd formerly worked in Imagination. We were extremely lucky in that I got two former heads of the Bluetooth group. One is now director of Bluetooth in SiliconBlu. The other is director of systems architectures. And managed to get a guy who'd been the former head of hardware within that group when there was 180 engineers in the days they were still selling technology to Apple. So we've got 5 guys in our tech team, and 3 of them are those 3 guys. The other 2 guys aren't bad either. They're really good engineers. So we have a very small team, but they are really high performance. And from what I've experienced, both as a design engineer and as being somebody in management, a small high performance team gets things done better and quicker than a big team of average guys. So
80-20 rule or whatever,
yeah,
even more.
Yeah. So we
90-10.
We incorporated this year. SiliconBlu is incorporated in February of this year. The same month, I acquired various IP rights to continue developing it. So the business unit that we were in, the company decided strategically in January of this year, January 2025, to focus on Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 7 and invest all their energies there. We had developed a BLE technology that was a differentiator that we believe is the best BLE subsystem in the world. But they're going after access points, Wi-Fi access points, and you don't need the best BLE subsystem in the world for that, because BLE only gets used for maybe several minutes while you're setting up a Wi-Fi router. It'll never be used again very often. So it was a differentiator that they paid to develop, but we're not going to use it in the future because it had been part of the plan to do a BLE only SoC chip, and that had kind of gone off the table. The market in China for Wi-Fi routers is very significant. You've got three of the biggest. You have not three of the biggest. I think you've got the three biggest players in terms of volume for Wi-Fi access points in China. And while I was at Imagination, we were involved in negotiating some of those. You're looking at 3 to 4 million units per month. If you were to get the likes of T-Mobile or an AT&T or a Deutsche Telekom, you might do, if you're very lucky, you might do 6 to 7 million in a year.
Just to pause there in terms of, because you mentioned it earlier as well, in terms of some of these low-end products and, let's say, being moved, some of those manufacturing development being moved to China. That didn't happen for you in the case of, or with Imagination from a Wi-Fi perspective? Was it unique enough IP that it couldn't be copied?
Wi-Fi IP?
Mm-hmm.
Wi-Fi IP is incredibly complex. A Mac or Phi architect, I don't believe there's 5,000 people on the planet capable of being a Mac or a Phi architect. That's how difficult Wi-Fi is.
Okay. So not easy is your
yes.
answer. Okay. But then,
And that's after 20 years of experience.
Okay.
I've been at meetings where there's been block diagram stuff done, and I'm not the greatest engineer in the world, not an idiot either, and it's just unbelievable how challenging Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 7 is. And designing it is one thing as well. Being able to close the timing loops and everything on it is Wi-Fi, any of the really high-speed data comms, things, you're looking at bits of data flying through the air at gigabit per second, and somehow one device transmitting it and a device somewhere else in a building with multiple other devices making sense of it.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
So when I worked in Mac in the late 90s and early noughties, people were amazed that you could put 10 megabits per second down a cable. Now you're looking at gigabits per second through the air. There's no other area that has moved like technology.
We've come a long way from even the dial-up days on wired, right? So,
yeah.
So just in terms of then that transition, you were saying, was it Imagination at the time was transitioning away, or leaving BLE behind, and that gave you an opportunity?
So after Imagination, after we sold the business unit, I left Imagination. The business unit that I'd been managing, the connectivity business unit, was effectively shut down. All of the key IP had gone. So it was a company called Senscom based in Suzhou. Interestingly and amusingly set up by guys who are not Chinese, they're mainly Korean, the founding team, based in Irvine in California. In 2017 tried to do a Wi-Fi 6 startup and couldn't get financial support in America, which is kind of interesting considering how the semiconductor wars have transpired since. So they went to China for both the money and the market. The Chinese market is, I actually think the Chinese market is bigger than the rest of the developed world put together, just for that kind of tech.
Wow.
Like it dwarfs the US, dwarfs Europe. You've got to get Europe. If you throw India, if you throw the US, Europe, India, you're probably getting close to the Chinese market. You have to throw in Japan and Korea and Australia and Canada and a few others to get more. I think the Chinese market is that big.
Okay, so that's where the focus is. In terms of then, just before we go into SiliconBlu, because I want to just learn a bit more about that as your current area of focus. That journey you've been on, just to reflect on it as you've talked through it, I mean, it seems like, was it a gradual entrepreneurial, or there were several opportunities along the way where you had these experiences? Is there anything in particular that stands out for you that you said, oh, suddenly I kind of like doing these things from startup phase almost and taking it?
Yeah, like VidiPro was a small unknown company when I joined in '83. We took on the biggest in the world. We were successful. Moog wasn't, in that it was an established company, but Moog Ireland took on our competitors, our internal competitors, and we won. Mac was all about working with guys who were taking on the world, like Superrule, Trintech, Ballinidi Manufacturing Systems, the lighting guys up in Belmullet. You could go on and on. I mean, CorkOpt was a startup. I joined them from Mac in 1996. I think I was the third person to try and run the company. But it happened on my watch, and we grew from one person to 11 people. I had other interests at the time. I left. The company was going very well. iWatt going into Europe in 2010. I was the first person in Europe selling them, and we grew the business, not just on what I was doing, but significantly was also what I was doing in the lighting game. I got all the major customers. Osram were global number 2 at the time, but global number 1 in terms of using chips for dimmable LED lighting. Philips could also do it. They had a proprietary way of doing it without using a chip. So all the business we got with Philips was on Philips Commercial. So yeah, I was working for a company. There was 150 people, so that's kind of a startup. I was the first person in Europe, and we grew that and were acquired. Made a lot of money for people. Yeah, I mean, most of the companies I've been involved in have been kind of startup in nature. They haven't always been one person though. It's maybe been more. CorkOpt was one person to many, and I was working with Liam Kelly, a really smart guy. He's a professor in the NMRC. He joined the company actually after about a year and a half, which was brilliant. But yeah, I've always been close to. I mean, Senscom, the Chinese company, when I joined them in April 21, between April 21 and July, there was 35 people in the company. So that grew to 150 people. And I mean, what really both surprised and shocked me was the level of finance that companies can get in China. I think what IC3 are doing, by the way, is brilliant in terms of getting stuff out of the lab and towards prototype stage. But to go from prototype to finished product, you're looking at least 5 to 10x in terms of spend. And I don't believe you can have people who move at the pace, and I'm not having a go at semi-state, but it just cannot move fast enough. It needs to be money that's put down, 30% or whatever of a fund, and the rest of it has to be private. It has to be private. Like that story I told earlier about GPA. GPA were global number 1 in aircraft leasing. Deutsche Bank pulled on them 2 weeks before they were going to go IPO. I think that if they had gone IPO, they would be the biggest company on the planet. And that mindset that they had, they spoke to us, and within 3 weeks, they had signed a purchase order. Now, GPA are exceptional. They were exceptional.
Yeah, so...
But that kind of, like, getting money is not just what's needed, John, it's fast money.
For sure.
And the only way to do that is that people who are in the industry make the decisions, that they can stand over and say, that's why we did it. Because I think if you've somebody who isn't in the industry, they just can't make the decision. They can't make the judgment call. And the judgment call needs to be made within weeks. Because that's what's happening with money in China. That's what's happening in money in the States. It's happening that fast. There's a company that we're looking at doing business with in the Netherlands, and they're really good. They've raised, June of last year, they'd raised about 28-30 million. But they were, when I first saw these guys, they were global number one. They still have the best technology, but some of the competitors are commercially being more successful because they're being funded better out of the States.
Yeah.
And they're not better company. They don't have better technology. They're just getting more money quicker. So they're going to scale faster.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting point and a valid point in terms of speed is critical in not just this space, but most places, right? Getting to market quickly, and we know about the multiples of financing required for that. Just to your own story then, in terms of, you heard a little bit about SiliconBlu and how it came about. Just for those who aren't familiar with, just to go back into the actual technology itself, the problem you're trying to solve, and what makes it unique.
Okay, well, I mean, the problem, I suppose the one thing that runs through a lot of what I've done in the last number of years is energy efficiency. You say, well, Bluetooth, that's comms technology, isn't it? Yes, it is. But if you can communicate reliably over a longer distance, i.e. transmit over a longer distance and receive a signal over a longer distance for a particular unit of energy, let's call it battery size, then that leads itself towards being able to get rid of disposable batteries. And that was one of the things that we set out to do going back about 3.5-4 years ago, was get our BLE subsystem as efficient as possible. So in terms of how quickly the BLE subsystem comes on, how the clock and power management is done, that has to be excellent. The amount of data that's communicated per advertisement, we believe we have as high as it can be. It's about 99%. The global number one is just over 90. We're ahead of them on that. And we know that because some of our guys have worked in that company. We have better receiver sensitivity per microwatt than anybody, and we've taped that out earlier this month, 14th of October. We've ex-Broadcom guys who are working with us on the RF. We spent 5 months negotiating that contract, and the reason it took so long is I believed at the time that our survivability, if you like, within Senscom would be doing a best in class, not second best, only the best. And to do that, we benchmarked against what was the best, and we said we have to be X amount better than that. The guys that are working on our RF are people who pretty much invented the all-digital PLL. They were acquired by Broadcom for that very reason. Almost, more than 15 years ago, in fact, pushing on towards 20. And they also developed the first BLE RF globally before BLE was a standard. They did it for Samsung glasses before Meta. So we're dealing with royalty here, technical royalty. And so we've a superb, so that's not...
Just in terms of application, let's go back to that then, in terms of the crux of it is, it's far more efficient than the nearest competitor from a usage distance perspective, leads to power saving, which could potentially lead to reduced battery requirements, etc. So particularly for what types of applications would you see? I appreciate you're developing an IP or a solution that could be used in multiple applications, but do you have a sense of, or just give us a sense of where you see that being used?
So where it becomes most important, having extremely low power consumption, is in applications where your battery isn't going to be easily recharged. So things like wireless sensing. For example, if you have a sensor in the corner of a room, if you want that to, if you take phone watch, every year I get batteries sent to me and they get replaced. So every time that happens, I get a piece of rare earth material and put it in, the right bin. Does it get recycled? I really don't know. If it goes into landfill, it's going to poison somebody. I really don't like that. So if you can do things like energy harvesting, where you have things called supercapacitors or rechargeable batteries, if you have a piece of equipment that, say, had a rechargeable battery, the chemistry would be fairly similar to a disposable, but instead of there being, 20 batteries, i.e. one battery for each year of 20 years, you just got one battery. So if you can get your power consumption down low enough, you can use energy harvesting and supercap technologies, energy storage devices. So that's a big thing. And a lot of that is down to the RF. I would like to say something though as well about in terms of our technology, we were approached by a guy in the industry that I know very well earlier this year, and he was trying to do a thing called group voice chat over wireless group chat over BLE. Now, anybody who's hard of hearing, or if you're ever in a noisy environment and you're kind of shouting, people will understand how difficult it can be to hear people. So the original Bluetooth was a single device to another single device. That was the original. That was mainly for audio. Then about 6, 7, 8 years ago, there was a new standard came out called Auracast. That's its current name, and that was one-to-many. So you could have something like a smartphone, and you could broadcast to many different devices. You could have multiple speakers in your house playing your music. We were given a challenge by this guy. Could we do group voice chat over BLE? And our controller and modem guys got that working. They proved its principle in 3 days, and they had a demo which we have on our website, which we released on the 5th of September of this year, and that's a world first. We're the first company globally to do that.
So that's significant implications. I mean, I know not first hand, but certainly second hand the implications of that in terms of enhancing for those, as you say, with hard of hearing, particularly in noisy environments. Use that and have that multi-chat function going on. You've got multiple things. Audios, right, and it doesn't. You can't distinguish between them.
And people who are hard of hearing have more difficulty with that. So you have to have a wireless earbud that would have a microphone in it. So it's not just a speaker, you also need the microphone. So you would have, let's say, 4 people in a noisy restaurant or in a pub at a match, everybody with their earbud, and you just set up like a WhatsApp group. You just set it up as a group, and the only people that are in it. Now you do have to do it through a phone, so somebody needs to have a phone that has BLE as well. But the latest iPhones do, the latest Samsungs do, and you can just set it up and you can chat away. Even if you're hard of hearing, you can have a higher quality experience.
Right. So tell us where you're at now. You mentioned tape out there recently.
So I'll give a very quick run through this year. I mean, I'm very lucky in that, and the key people who are in our former company, Senscom, they all stayed with me. I managed to raise a lot of money very quickly in a time that I'd say has almost never been done in Ireland. So the company was incorporated on 7th of September. I met a Chinese investor, by the way, at MWC in early March, and we got money in early April. And it had to be because the guys couldn't wait around any longer. So the team were in place in April. We had a BLE 5.3 well proven. There was a BLE 5.4 in completion, and we're almost finished a thing called channel sounding. And what that is, it's a technique that's used for distance measurement. So BLE has gone way beyond audio. You can use it for measuring distance, which is a key thing, and channel sounding, depending on how well it's implemented, is capable of measuring distance to less than a meter accuracy, which allows you to do things like find me. You could have it on a keychain, a little beacon or something like that. And where we're trying to bring BLE over the medium term is that you can do things like a kind of a very approximate kind of movement detection. It's very possible with Wi-Fi, as multiple people have done that. Wi-Fi is wider bandwidth, so it's easier. But we're looking at ways of trying to do that kind of stuff as well, so that BLE is not just about wireless communication, but it moves to also being a form of a sensor.
Okay, but your first focus would be on, let's say, the traditional or known use of BLE in terms of the audio piece. Do you see that as the main?
We have the audio implemented. We have isochronous audio, and that's already done. We see the main opportunity for what we've done with the group voice chat over BLE. I think the main opportunity there would be to work with an audio company that has audio technology and integrate the BLE with it. So there is a group called the Bluetooth SIG, Special Interest Group, and they release requirements documents, feature requirement documents, and 5 of the top 8 hearing aid companies are in that, as in we are seriously interested in wireless group chat. So we will absolutely pursue that. But when you develop a technology, and sometimes that gets developed based on the specs, because Bluetooth is very specs driven, but also you respond to what companies you're getting traction with, and the whole area of wireless sensing, using ultra low power, not just ultra low power BLE, but using things like energy harvesting, smart energy storage, and also ultra low power AI compute to draw more, kind of add intelligence to what's been sensed, so that you can build a bigger picture of what your raw inputs are. That's a very big area that hasn't really happened yet. It's quite fragmented, and I think a lot of the reason is that nobody has really managed yet to do it wirelessly, do it using energy harvesting properly at a cost-effective solution level,
Okay, interesting.
And again, this feeds back into what a lot of the guys are interested in. If you can have, things like really good sensing, you can make buildings more efficient, you can make cities smarter, you can do all sorts of things in transportation, you can make a difference.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, we've seen lots of progress, haven't we, in this space over the last number of years.
We have, yeah.
Seems like there's much more to come in it as well. So, in terms of how your journey then is going, I mean, it sounds like lots of good stuff. You've got some technology partnerships, you've got the VC or financial support.
We have some financial support.
Always talks and needing more perhaps. But how would you sum up where you're at and your thoughts for the future then in terms of the company?
We're at I've done 1 or 2 startups in the past and been involved on the edges of many, because a lot of my friends are startup types. You're never really sure is the honest answer. You do your best every day. You have a vision of where you want to try and get to. The most important thing in the early phases is actually survival. You can call it whatever you want, but in tech it's way more difficult than other businesses, and I've been involved in other businesses that aren't what I would call high tech, and they are frankly a walk in the park in comparison, because you can generate revenue fairly quickly in a lot of businesses, so it's all marginal. You trim your costs and You can make your P&L look good. But you can't do that with tech because you've got a lot of smart people working and you just have massive overheads. The equipment that's used, the tools that are used, all the the tape outs, the wafer fabs. If you're going for an SoC, you got multiple IPs you have to license in. There's no such thing as if you do let's say a power management chip or something, you might get it taped out for, I don't know, 500k. If you've got some extra IP that you need in there, let's say it's a bit more. But if you have something like a BLE SoC where you've got memory, you've got processors, you've got clock and power management, and a few other fancy bits in there, you're getting no change out of 6 or 7 million. It'll probably cost you 10 or 12.
Yeah, sure.
And that's not for a complex chip. Not a particularly complex one.
Yeah, but I guess so there's high barriers to entry in one sense.
Yeah.
In the other sense that there's higher cost as a result and
yeah.
a bit more lengthy in terms of rolling it out. In terms of, I mean, you're a seasoned guy in the sector. How do you find, let's say, the ecosystem or the community of folks in Ireland, and is that an area of support for you?
Yeah.
And is it something what would be your advice to people in that space as well? How has it worked for you, and how do you see it improving?
I think in the area of research, I think Europe is doing a reasonably good job at supporting research, because research moves at a particular pace. It's usually quite complex and people can work on multiple different things, and it's never quite at the hard edge of commerce, if you know what I mean. So I think Ireland's pretty good at that. We're very good at relationship building, so we tend to be good at building relationships and networks and consortia for getting funding for us. So going from idea to kind of proving something like kind of proof of concept and getting papers written on it, I think is well supported. I think going from proof of concept to battle proven IP or really good demonstrator is not so well supported in the same way. I think going from demonstrator to product is a brutal challenge, and not just in Ireland, I think in all of Europe. And money, there's something like 10% of pension funds in the US go into tech and startups, into VCs. In Europe, from what I know, it's less than 1%. If I didn't do startups, I consider myself being a cheat. I'm built for it, so I'll do it.
It's ingrained in some people. We just need to make it easier.
The advice I'd give, you could kind of joke and say, "Don't do it. You're insane." But life is, you've got a certain amount of time on the planet. It's the greatest opportunity to make a difference.
Yeah, good one to conclude on. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, as they say. A couple of quick light touch ones here now. The best advice you've ever received?
The best advice: health is your wealth. That's the best advice. Yeah. Because there's no, I've a lot of friends who are very wealthy and their health isn't great. I'd prefer to be a pauper with good health.
Sounds good. Any technology that you just couldn't live without today?
Not really, no.
No, you feel for a guy in tech, you'd be quite happy. On that desert island, but you wouldn't miss anything.
Not really. I mean, I guess smartphone. I mean, smartphones are just indispensable. But some of the best moments I have are when it's nowhere near me. I've forgotten to bring it with me. It's just fantastic, and nobody can get me. It's great.
What about those Bluetooth earbuds that you? And then in terms of new technology or emerging technology, aside from the great stuff you're doing with SiliconBlu, Gerry, is there anything out there that you think and look at and go, wow, that's exciting?
I think for me the biggest thing and the thing that excites me the most is what may happen in the area of healthcare. I think the quality of people's lives is massively impacted by their health, and way too many people take it as a given, and you kind of get away with it when you're in your 20s and 30s, and then suddenly you talk to people and they've got a persistent pain. You say, is that sore? Yeah, it's brutal. And how long have you had it? And it's 15 or 20 years. And you're kind of going, your quality of life must be really shit because of that. And they go, yeah. So I think there's a lot of stuff happening. I think the kind of, I think more transparency in healthcare would be a huge thing. I intend to kick ass when I'm still 100, like.
Well, it's interesting. We are an aging population. You talked about the pensions earlier. You talked about your solution for people with hard of hearing. Not that that's limited to us older folks, but there's a lot of, clearly there's a bit of a health thing there. Is, as you say, health as well. So.
What's been very interesting, and it gives me, and it's not an Irish thing, by the way, but it's a consumer electronics show. It's on every year in Las Vegas. It's a global exhibition, and the last two times I've been at it, this year, 24 and 25, what's really hit me is the amount of med tech coming out of countries like South Korea and France, and it's all young kids. It's all 25 to 35, 40. There's almost none of them over 40. And the kind of stuff they're doing on Alzheimer's, on all this kind of, really innovative ways of using tech. And I think it's a massive opportunity for Irish kids to get involved, where you would have your silicon guys like me teaming up with medical professionals and having multidisciplinary teams, rather than just being a bunch of silicon heads. That you've got a bunch of silicon heads, but some seriously smart pharmacists, medical, and and you're kind of merging. You kind of go like, multidisciplinary. I think is, and I think Europe can be really good at that.
Yeah.
I think we can be better than the States or China at that. I think Europe can be number one at that kind of tech.
That's a good, interesting point. And even in Ireland, Tindy, we know
there's
a lot of med tech companies as well.
Yeah.
There's various med tech groups and clusters in Ireland as well. So yeah, it's a good one. So on that note, I think you'll be supporting them. I was surprised, why limit yourself to 100? Gerry, if technology, is to progress.
I thought I'd still be
200 is perhaps the maximum.
I thought I'd kick ass at 100. I didn't say I was going to croak it.
All right, so on that note, we'll be back in touch in 21.